think we're live. Are we live? Yes, we are. G'day everyone. Back for our usual Friday live Sony Alpha Rumours and News show. Let me just move this away so I'll clean this table up a little bit. So how are we all today? Let me also make sure that that's on silent, which it is now. Let's open up the Corona before we start. I wonder if I should be a fraction brighter. I'll just put it up just a touch. So pop in the chat and say hi. I'm going to open up this lovely drink and put a couple of limes in. My own limes from my own garden, guys. So, bing and bing. Kerry will tell me off because it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. But you know what? Who cares? It's afternoon somewhere. Cheers, everyone. I'm loving Anthony there, says a bit early, bloke. Well, it is a little bit early, but like I said, it's 6 o'clock somewhere, isn't it, Anthony? Carol says, on a line, but on a conference call at the moment. Well, so you're here as well as being on a conference call, Carol. Good to see you. Let me know, too, in the live chat. I think I'm all right, actually. I'm just seeing if it's if I'm too dark. I think it's all right. Let me know if you think I'm a bit dark, because I can make it a bit brighter if I want to, but then it gets rid of all of my ambience. So this is pre-show, guys. If you don't want to... someone just said the pub's open at 10 a.m. Exactly, Barry. Exactly. Ian said, evening, David, just gone midnight in the UK. Michelle said it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And you're exactly right, Michelle. Let me move over to here so we can see what people are saying. This cough, I wish I could get rid of it. Barry said, morning. Nevak's also saying, hello, David. Anthony saying, morning. Ben is here. Hey, legend. G'day, Ben. How are you going? We go off daylight savings too this Sunday, so the times are going to change another hour. I think we go forward an hour, I think. Scissorman's here as well. Richard's here. Nivak, hope you and everyone is healthy. Michelle saying hello from Los Angeles area. Hi, Michelle. Anthony's telling me off because he said it's a bit early. Carol's here as well. Hello from an undisclosed bunker in the US. What does that mean, Trip? Are you hiding out somewhere? Anthony said, spouse, nothing else to do. I suppose nothing else to do. It's Thursday night in New Jersey. It must be time for David. Yep. Rob said, hello, David. G'day, Rob. Go with the camera notification squad. Guys, we are in pre-show, so if you don't want to watch it, I will stick the timeline down below so you'll be able to skip to whatever story you want to go to. But we're in pre-show for another 6-7 minutes. Oops. So Rob says, hello, go with the camera, said notification squad. Move the yard arm. What does that mean? Which yard arm? I'm not sure what that means. Pub's open at 10 a.m, no problem, Barry said, and that's exactly right. That's why I'm doing this. I thought, why not? Michelle said it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Carol said, yep. Chris said, hello, David. Another day inside in Los Angeles. A Bud Light day for you, Chris. Nice. Anthony said, in the old days, the pub just opened. Mark said, hey, David and everyone. Hi, Mark. How are you? Guy with the camera said, no pubs around here, only doom and gloom. Where's that? You can still, well, the pubs are all shut here as well. I mean, we are in partial lockdown. But you can still go to the bottle shop, thank God, because at least then I can go and buy my Corona. But the funny thing is that there's been a massive run on the bottle shop, so now they're limiting alcohol that you can buy. But I had to laugh because the limit that you can buy is something like 2 cases of beer, and you can only then also buy 2 bottles of wine or something like that. And I laughed because I thought, oh my God, they're limiting it, but the amount was ridiculous. Panda, thank you so much. I'm drinking one as well. That's great. Panda's been pumping out some videos like crazy lately, so go check him out. Oops. Where were we? Beer at 8 a.m. No, it's not 8, Mark. It's 10 o'clock here. You're in... Are you just having a go at me? Because it'd be 9 o'clock, wouldn't it, in Queensland? Wouldn't it? You're an hour earlier. Is it an hour earlier, Mark, or is it an hour later? I can never remember. G'day, Jim. Good to see you in here. John says, hey, David. Anthony said he's back. Mark said, yeah, you Southerners will be back in our time in Queensland. Yeah, exactly. We'll be back up to your time. So what time are you into there now, Mark? Is it an hour ahead or is it an hour behind? Because it's 10:10 here. So is it 11:10 or 9:10 where you are? Hello, Mr. David. Quite a while now. Has it been quite a while since you've been on, has it? 1 hour. So you're 1 hour forward. Okay, so we've got to go 1 hour forward on Saturday night. Panda's drinking as well. Anthony says, sailors saying sun's over the yardarm. Hook into it. You're not having a few drinks there, Anthony, are you? I love it. Now, I can't tell you. I've got to be secret. Shh, come here. I'll just, hang on. Shh. You can't tell. It's just between us. All right, so you cannot say anything to anyone. So hang on. Where are we? I've got to tell you a secret, all right? Hang on. You ready? You ready? Something special is coming on Monday for me. ASMR. Ooh. And I've only had this much beer. Oh, I love it. Did you hear it? Could you hear me? Because I was whispering. I was giving you my ASMR. I was giving you my... Oh, I love it. So, I'm getting something special on Monday, but it's a secret. Can you guess what it is? But I can't tell you yet. Like Ben said, is this your first or 10th Corona? It's only my first, Ben. But I'm excited because I've been told that something is coming for me on Monday. Ooh, and it's really exciting. Can't say any more. You're going to have to wait, because if I get it, I'll do an unboxing live on Monday. So, let's see if anyone can guess, but I'm not going to tell you anyway, so you're going to have to wait and see. Got some really exciting things to show you or discuss today. Got some really good rumours. Triple saying what the... I know, but I was giving you my ASMR. Look, you're all bored at home, so I'm giving you my ASMR, but there is something exciting coming on Monday. I'm not lying. I think I'm definitely going to get it on Monday, according to this phone call, unless something happens. So that's Tuesday your time in the US and Europe, Monday my time sometime. So I might be doing a live unboxing of something on Monday, and it's big. So let's see who else is here. Where were we? We're still in pre-show, guys, at the moment. Sorry, still sleepy here. 9:11. Okay, so it is. It's 9:11. So you're an hour back, Mark. Yep. John, breakfast beer is a thing. It is, John. I know. 9:11 in Queensland. Returned home. 18:11 here in Minnesota. G'day, David and everyone. Goose Island, Next Coast IPA. I'm not sure what that means. Ben, you're making me cough, Ben, because you make me laugh. Ben said, is this your first or 10th Corona? I love it. Christmas on Monday. I know, Jim, it is. It's going to be Christmas on Monday. Something special is coming. Ooh. I thought you were going to reveal no pants. What does that mean? Mario said, hello, David from Canada. G'day, Mario. You have enough equipment? No, look, I haven't bought anything. It's not bought. It's going to be lent to me. But it's pretty cool. And I can't say any more just in case if it doesn't come. But I think it's going to come and I'll do a live unboxing with you. That may give you a hint. And it is something to do with cameras, obviously. But no, I haven't bought anything. I've got no money. Don says, so you're getting an a7 IV. Ooh, Don, interesting. PhotoMX says, yeah, g'day, Ike. How are you? Basil says, a little wacky today. Just excited from that phone call I got this morning, Basil. Mr. David, what does Sony have for us now? Well, you're going to have to wait and see. One pot screamer. Oh, I haven't even had a pot yet. Guy with the camera said Tamron 70 to 180 confirmed. Interesting. Jim said Photomiac. The Panda says it's a new car for Kerry. John said Tamron lens. Oh, a few people are saying Tamron. Interesting. I can't tell you. Michelle said Tamron 70 to 180. Ben said it's the angry photographer who's coming on Monday. The Sony a7 IV. Monday in Australia should mean later Sunday in the US. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's the opposite way, isn't it? Yep. Because we're ahead of you, yeah. Basil says you can't open it until Tuesday, though, because of the Rona. The Rona. I love it. They say they say you need to let packages sit a day. This would have been in Australia for a little bit. And don't worry if I cough, I haven't got corona. I've been tested. I'm fine. I just get this stupid cough every year, a couple of times a year. It drives me nuts. Lasts for a few weeks. It would have already been here for a little bit, I think. For a few days, I would say. But if you think I'm not going to, I'll just probably disinfect my hands and then I'm going to be into it because I want to unbox it straight away. Basil said you can't open it Tuesday. Oh, that's right, because I just read that. Triple said, dang, I held off buying the A9 when it dropped to 3,100 US. I need a package on Monday too. I know that it's so cheap at the moment, the A9. I've seen some great prices, but then again, everything's going to be cheap at the moment. Something big, 600 Sony GM. That's large. Well, it doesn't have to be big, but I mean, it's a big story. You know, it doesn't have to be a big, massive, honking 600mm lens. Let me put it that way. Mike says, I'm going to be unboxing myself, still locked up. I love it. Rob said, explain big. Well, like I said, it doesn't have to be big, like in big in size, but it's a big story, I think. You know, like it's going to be a big thing for me. I've been hanging out for it for so long. Rob said, explain big. I did that. G'day, Oreo. Good to see you here. Rob said, you can tell us. We won't tell anyone. I did. I went, shh. The Panda says, yes, it's the Tamron. His face expression says it all. I love it. AJ, hello from California. You don't have to tell us, just nod. I can't tell you. I've told you more than what I should have already, but it's. I've been hanging for this. You guys probably know what it is, but I'm not telling you. You'll have to wait and see. Baz said Tamron 70 to 180 definitely on Monday. Interesting. Sean said, just got sale 16 to 50, SSM 2.8. Lovely. Jim said, so it's a lens. Maybe, Jim. Gerald says, hi, Gerald here. G'day, Gerald. How you going? What's going on, everyone? Langston said, everything is big for a small guy. Well, that's true. I love it, Mike. That's a classic. Hi, the Panda, Gerald Williams and Langston. Jim said. Kevin said, Tammy 70 to 180. They are sending them out to testers to different ones. Ooh. Jim Penn, yo. Don said, are you switching to Canon? No, not at all. I might buy one, though, when I've got some money. I don't have any money at the moment, though, so I won't be doing that at the moment, that's for sure. I'm just waiting on the Blackmagic announcement from tomorrow. Hope they make a 50 to 150 1.8. All right, guys, we have sort of hit the time now, so I'm going to just put down here show start, which is 14:40. Let's get stuck into this show.
If you're looking for some crazy, I'll tell you everybody. water slide. You can come on over. We can take the roller coaster. And you know everybody's looking for a ride in the water slide. Water slide.
Welcome everyone. We've had a little bit of a pre-show. We're now on to the main part of the show, or the beginning of the show. I am having a Corona. It's only 10 a.m. in the morning, but stuff it. I just thought, who cares? I'm having one anyway. I initially said to Kerry, can you bring me in a coffee? And then I said, no, look, stuff it. I'm going to get a Corona. And it's even got my own lime in there, so I'm ready to go. So cheers everyone. All in lockdown like we are. I've just been telling people that I've got something exciting coming on Monday. I believe it's going to be coming unless something happens. But I have got a special unboxing for you on Monday. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about getting this thing. I haven't purchased it. It's on loan. But stay tuned. So stay tuned for Monday Australian time, Sunday US time. I'm not sure what time it'll be here though. But once I get it, I'll do an unboxing. So looking forward to that. If you don't want to watch every story that I've got on today, you can skip. I'll have a timeline down below. Excuse the cough. I hate this thing. It drives me nuts. If you want to say go to a certain story, you can just put that down because it'll have the time for each story. So you can do that if you wanted to do it that way. If you haven't checked out the video I did with Aaron the other day and you're bored, check it out, guys. We had a lot of fun, even though we had a couple of technical issues early on. Aaron looked a little bit green or hulky in his picture profile that he'd used, or his LUT. Check that out too, because I love the behind the photo. It's something a little bit different that we do, which is more photography related rather than hardware related or gear related, whereas today's more Sony orientated with Sony news and rumors and things like that. So if this thing does come, I did an ASMR earlier in the pre-show. If this thing does come, I will unbox it on Monday for you, and then obviously I'm going to go out and use it. I'll have to just try and work out how I can get around the lockdown. I was thinking though that in theory, and I had a discussion, and I'd love to know your opinion on this too, but in theory, as I'm a professional photographer, they haven't stopped in Victoria, like tradesmen or businesses going out and working, as long as you are doing social distancing and things like that. So in theory, I was thinking about it, I should be okay to go and do a shoot somewhere as long as I'm away from everyone else and I only have one other person with me. Because it's a business. They're saying at the moment, and I listened to it on the news this morning, they had the police commissioner on, and he actually said in that unless it's a business, you're allowed to go out and do exercise, things like that, but businesses are still allowed to run at this stage. Like you can do personal training, you can be one-on-one, things like that. So in theory, I should be okay to take this thing that's coming on Monday out. And as long as I only have one person with me, I should be able to shoot it. But now it might be that I just use Kerry if that may happen. I'm not sure, or I might try and get my daughter or something. I'll have to think about what I'll do. But it should be okay as long as I don't go near anyone and I only have one person with me. So I think that's what I'll be able to do to review this thing that's getting sent to me. So I'm pretty excited about it. I love Mike there. He said you can make it legal portraits with a 600mm because that certainly will be far enough away from each other. Let's just quickly look at what the chat's having to say. Excuse me. Everyone's saying hi. Ultra fast Zoom. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in the story. I know it's really quite exciting actually from Tamron. I'm just waiting on the Blackmagic announcement. Langston said, what are they announcing, Langston? Have they said what they're announcing? Hope they make a 50 to 151.8, Hero has said. Gerald's just saying hi to people. Rob said, is it a production or pre-production? Well, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask when they bring it. If whatever I get is pre-production, there may be limits to what I can talk about this thing. If it's a production release or close to production, I might have complete freedom to do whatever I want to do with it. I have to be fair. If it's got older firmware, this thing may have firmware. If it has older firmware on it, then I have to be careful about what I show at this stage. But I'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure. I don't think they even knew yet, because when they contacted me, they said they hadn't received it yet. That's why I'm hoping it's going to come on Monday. But all I know is I'll be the first in Australia to get it, and probably one of the first in the world. What else have we got? Guy with the camera said Tamron to 7130 F2 rumour. Yeah, I know. I'm going to talk about that shortly. Brought to you by Corona. The Panda said, cheers. Mike says, I hope they didn't send it a 1st of April empty box. Oh, that'd be terrible, Mike. Wouldn't that be awful? Langston said, cheers. Actually having a coffee here. Triple Z said, Kerry, keep bringing in the beers. This could be fun. Coffee here also. Jim's on. What's wrong with you guys? You need to get into it. If you're stuck at home, join me. Michelle saying hi, team. Mark said, can't wait to see the new thing. Took Sony forever, but worth the wait. Ooh. Tim said, I hope the Sony a7 IV drives the a7 III prices down in prices this Thanksgiving Thanksgiving near to Christmas, I think you're saying. Pergy just sent me the Godox FV150 HSS LED flash. How'd you like it, Ike? Tamron has been revived in Germany and got glowing report. Yeah, I saw that review actually. I'm going to talk about that shortly, because I'll mention something that he said about that lens. Oops. Photomix says, I'm calling a model up ASAP. Are you still allowed to go out and shoot, Ike? I thought you were in lockdown, but you are still allowed to go out, are you? Hero said, yo, how is the Light Lord, Ike? Mike said, I said where you can make it legal if you use a 600mm to go out. I just got it, but my plan is to give it away to one of you once I shoot with it. Oh, that's that light. Okay, I don't need it, he's saying. Now I can't stop hearing Chris Farley talk about how they wound up in Van Down the River. I'm not sure what that means. Langston said, David, they said it's something camera related. So this is Black Magic. Oh, okay. And it's something production related. So I'm guessing a camera announcement and some broadcast studio equipment announcement. Interesting. Gene said it's the Tamron 70 to 180. David Oster's poker face says it all. I love it, Gene. That's a classic. Well, it's a Patreon exclusive giveaway, so your chances are better if you're on Potato Jet's channel. What else? Sony a7000. Mike said, here in Holland, the red light district is still open, only for guys with a 1.5 metre thing. I love it. Ike said, laugh out loud. Hero said, A6700 with dual card slots. I love it. All right, so let's get started, guys. Ike said, my plan is to shoot in my basement, so I won't be outdoors. Yeah, okay. Because you guys, particularly in the US at the moment, it's really bad over there, isn't it? Let me put down the time, because we're going to go into the first story. So it's, what are we, 23? I'll just put 24. It's going to be close enough by the time I get over. All right, so first story, guys. Let's get stuck into this show. So let me just move this over. I'll switch back off and then come in. All right, so first story. This is a really interesting one, and it doesn't surprise me because, let me just mark on the chat too where we're up to, just so I can come back to it, hopefully. This is really quite interesting. So what this rumour is saying, it's basically saying they've seen patents, a newly published patent. It actually says down here, a newly published patent, Tamron patent, describes the design of two exciting zooms made for full-frame mirrorless system cameras. And what they're saying is that it's going to be a 70 to 130 f2 lens. the FE. This would be the fastest zoom in the FE system. This other one that they're saying here too is a 200 to 400 f4 lens, and this would be This would compete with the Sony 100 to 400 GM. Yes, the Sony has a 100mm wider end, but the Tamron would be faster and a more compact in size. Let me just see what they're saying about voting on this. So everyone's saying I would buy the 200 to 400 FE, I would buy the 7100 F2. There's less people buying that, 38%, and 11% said they wouldn't buy either of these. So it's really interesting. I mean, 70 to 130 F2, boy, are we, like I said, these lens companies, and I'm also going to talk about Sigma a little bit later on today too, but now that Tamron is really starting to lift its game in the FE realm, we really are going to see some amazing lenses in the coming months or years. It's only a matter of time until we get some really fast primes, and I mean really fast primes, and I'll talk about that for a Sony fast prime that's been rumoured in a story a little bit later on. But it looks like that we're going to start to see fast primes from Tamron. Now, I can probably say too that we will probably end up getting faster primes from Sigma as well. Zoom lenses. But this is a great sign that Tamron are going to be doing this. The Tamron lenses now do seem to be, they really have now got amazing optical qualities in their lenses. They really are good, and I love using them. Like I said, I love using the 70 to 28 and the 28 to 75. The 70 to 180 will be one that I'll get in the future. Just not at this stage due to basically the industry just dying, like it has over the last few weeks. But certainly later on, I will get that lens and I'll probably sell my 70 to 200 f4. I'm almost certain that that's probably what I'll end up doing, and I'll get the 70 to 180. But, if you are in a market for something that's a little bit faster, this obviously will be bigger because it's going to be an f2 lens, so I think it will be a larger lens. It will be probably heavier, but it's a nice focal length if you wanted to have something that you wanted to use in lower light. It's interesting. I mean, I personally, I think I probably would go for the 70 to 180 over this though. But it's a lens that's interesting if you wanted to have something that's a little bit different, a little bit faster. That's probably why more people are tending to say they'd like to go for the 200 to 400 more. Now, this will probably be half the price of what you're paying for a GM. It'll be interesting to see how the quality is, but I'll talk about the quality of the 70 to 180 in a minute. And you might find that this 200 to 400 is going to be amazing optically. Now, it is f4, but, that's fine at that focal range anyway, unless you're doing sports or something where you need a 2.8, I suppose. But I can understand why that is getting the most sort of hits or votes, because I think that's a much more useful lens than what the 70 to 130 is. I'd probably just get the 70 to 180, and it's a 2.8. Rather than the f2 version. But I just thought I'd share that with you. It seems to be that other manufacturers now are going to start doing lenses that are probably different than what we've got from Sony. It's going to be interesting to see how Sony sort of answers all of these. Now, I suppose Tamron are partly owned by Sony anyway, so Sony are going to get a cut from this anyway. But the beauty of the Sony lenses are you can update the firmware and everything inside the lens, so it's a much simpler system than if you have, say, a Sigma or something like that. But Sigma, I think I was reading somewhere they're talking about making a new dock. I read that somewhere this morning as well, so that may not be much of an issue. But it is so much better being able to just put the lens on your camera and upgrade it through your firmware, like you're upgrading Sony lenses or the Sony camera. But I thought that was a really interesting announcement, and boy, it's just going to keep getting better and better and better for the Sony users out there for the FE mount. And like I said, these things will probably be half the price of anything that Sony would bring out at the equivalent focal length and f-stop. So I think it's pretty exciting. I'd love to know what you think about it. I'm going to open up the chat because I'd love to know if anyone is thinking that they'd be interested in any of these, or would you prefer just to wait for the 70 to 180? Have you already tried the Sigma 35? Yes, Mike, the Sigma, I looked at that when we were in the US because Michael had it. and it was beautiful. It's stunning. The Sigma 35 1.2 is incredible. It is an amazing lens. So yes, I did that, but it's a massive honking lens. It's really, really big. So you have to justify carrying that weight around or be comfortable carrying that weight around. But if you're going to have a 1.2 anyway, it's going to be larger anyway. I'm surprised with the GM that they can get that, the GM down to the size that they've got it. But that's a 1.4. But still, when you think that the 24 1.4 is that size, Sony did some amazing work to keep it down to that size. But if it's a 1.2 lens, it's going to be substantially bigger than what we're looking at here. Hero said yes, he tried the 35. Yes, I did. It's awesome. It's amazing quality. I loved it. It's really sharp. 70 to 180, 70 to 180. Hero said, oops, yeah, the 1.2. Photomix said 70 to 130 f2. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I suppose it's another option, Ike, if you did want it. It depends on what they cost that at. Like I said, I personally think I would just go with a 70 to 180, but I mean, it's another option that's there if you need a little bit of extra light. I don't know how big that's going to be, or what the cost's going to be, so it's going to be interesting. The 200 to 400, though, is definitely interesting for a lot of, wildlife photographers and things like that. It could be an interesting lens. When is all this stuff coming out? Right now, I can't even get a webcam. Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, with the virus issues that are going on at the moment, we don't know when this sort of stuff will be announced. It's only a patent at the moment, so we don't know. Oreo said 70 to 130 f2, a dream lens for a wedding photographer. Yeah, good point, Oreo. It would be a beautiful lens. And if it's nice and if they can make the potential for it to be reasonably light, it could be a gorgeous lens, a great portrait lens, for instance. And that's a good point that Oreo made there. Mike said Tamron is really good these days. Yes, they certainly are. Mike said, if I still had a Sony, I bought the Tamron Zoom and Sony Primes. I had the 28 to 75, was a nice travel lens. Yeah, I used that one extensively, the 28 to 75 in the US. I'll probably put out a review about that. I've still got to review the 17 to 28. I have put up a review of the 20mm that I used in the US. So that's up now. So if you wanted to check those images, I have put that review up. I'll also be doing a 17 to 28, the Tamron lens, because I'll be talking about how that went on the trip, and the Tamron 28 to 75. And I will be looking at also the 135 GM and the 24 GM, because I use that in some portrait shoots as well. So I have got a few reviews coming out about those lenses in the coming days. Announcement today and get in a year, maybe, Mark. Yeah, probably would be at the moment, I would say. I don't think anything's going to come out in the short term at the moment. Ike said, I'd rather have the 70 to 200 f2.8 85 primes for those low aperture shots. Guy with the camera said, I'm no wedding photographer and I can dream. Mark said the 70 to 130 f2 would weigh a fair bit. I think so. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It also depends on what the optics are like as well, Mark. I mean, if it's really amazing optics, it's going to probably be a little bit heavier. But the f2 would definitely be heavier. Yes, definitely. Ted said the 70 to 180, I'm sure. What do you think about the Canon EOS R5? I think it looks amazing. From everything that I've seen, I think that camera is going to really push Sony. It's the first time Sony have really been pushed, I think, overall as an overall camera. And I think if it's going to be, and it looks like it's definitely going to be as it's announced, I don't think Canon have held back on this one. I think Canon have finally woken up. It may be a camera that I buy down the line to do 4K 60 or video side of things. I'm not going to get rid of Sony. Sony's still going to be my main platform, but it might be something that I just get to have a play with. But that's going to be way down the line for me anyway, because I couldn't afford it at the moment. But it certainly, if Sony don't release something that gives similar specs to the R5, I mean, even the R6 looks like it's a really good release as well. If Sony don't answer the R5, like I said, in the end of this year or whatever, when things start to pick up again, or early next year, I might buy an R5. I feel about another kind of gas coming on, George said. 70 to 130 f2 might be interesting. See, it all depends on what you'd like to shoot with. Thumbs up, please, Jim said. Yes, I'd love it if you could give me a thumbs up, guys. It does help. Ike said, Jim said, I'm not in the lens market unless I trade my 100-400 in for a 135 GM. Yeah, when we were in the States, Jim loved using the 135, and then he realised how beautiful that lens is. It's still my favourite lens that I've got, the 135. I absolutely adore that lens. For portraits, it's just stunning. There's nothing like it out there, I don't think. Ike said an interesting thing for the Tamron folks mentioned at WPPI is that the 20, 24 and 35 2.8 lenses all use the same casing to save on manufacturing cost. They just change the optics internally. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And like I said, the manufacturing of these Tamron lenses, guys, is superb. Don't get put off by the fact that everyone says they're not as well built as a GM. Well, they might not feel as well built in the construction materials that they're made from, but boy, are these things they are so robust. And like I said, I've had this since the day it was released, and it still looks brand new. Like it's crazy. Like I said, Gerald, when we were in the US, dropped his and it bounced down the road. I think that was a 17 to 28. Bounced down the road, he picked it up and there wasn't a mark on it, and it works fine. So they are very, very robust. So I think the materials that they use, even though they're plastics, it's very high-end plastics, and they tend to just last forever. Jim said, I heard the same thing at WPPI. It does make sense, though. It does make sense that they're the same casing, and then all they have to do is change the internal parts to that. Rated, hey guys, long time. Michael says, Canon already has the superior glass. They will have the superior camera soon. No reason to stay with Sony. Well, I disagree, Michael. I love Sony, so I'm not going to dump Sony. I'm not going to shift again. I shift from Nikon or Nikon to Sony. I'm too invested in Sony again now, and you just lose too much by switching over. And look, to be honest, all the camera manufacturers are good. The only thing that I need, and I've discussed this to you before, is 4K 60, and Sony just don't seem to be able to release that. So I wouldn't think that the M5, the R5, the only reason why you would switch is if you were a videographer and you needed those video features. If you're stills, there's no reason to switch. Sony has everything that you need. So, you know, remember, I'm mostly a stills shooter. I do fusion, so I am doing some video. But there's no reason I would switch from my Sony system to Canon if I was just a still shooter. And I disagree about the glass. The glass is incredible. It really is amazing, but the Sony 135 also is incredible. The Sony GM24 is also incredible. So Sony do have some amazing glass out there as well. But I'm always honest with you guys. I would love to try the Canon, the R5, and it might be something down the line that I get, but I certainly won't be switching. It'll just be another part to what I have and be able to shoot with. But Michael, if you're a Sony shooter and you wanted to change to Canon, go ahead. I mean, everyone, remember, has their own opinions why they want to shoot with a system, but I think a lot of people just jump too quickly. You know, you've got to have a reason for jumping over, and you can't say in the still side that Sony are not up there with the best. They are. So there's no reason to switch if you are a still shooter, that's for sure. Mike said, I'll wait for the 21.4 for Canon, hope they make it, but for Sony it would also be great for a 21.4 GM. My favourite primes are 20, 35 and 85. Gerald says, I love the 135 GM. I had to wrestle it back from loaning it to Jim. I love it. Yes, the Tamrons are tough. Mine bounced onto cobblestones in San Francisco, Chinatown, and I picked it up, not a scratch, and works fine. I was impressed. Yep. The material is incredible. It really is. If Gerald had dropped this GM lens like that, it would have been marked. I can guarantee it. It would have had a big mark in it, but there wasn't a mark on his lens. Langston said it's why I switched to Blackmagic. That's due to the video side of things. Mark said, Mike Walters, Sony already has a 21.8. Yes, it does. So I'm not seeing any reason for Sony to do a GM version. Well, they might want to do a 1.2, Mark. That could be the only reason, I suppose, that they would do a faster version of that. Remember, the 1.8 20mm is not a GM lens. It's not as sharp as a 24, for instance. Not even switch really. Didn't abandon Sony. It's just used for the stills. Yep. George said, don't downplay the Tamron lens materials. My Tamron lens feels great, especially in the wallet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do. Roscoe said they are waiting for you to buy the R5 and then the next day they will wow everyone. I'd love to try the R5, Roscoe. It seems like it's going to be an amazing camera. See, I'm a little bit different. Even though I love Sony so much, I still will give other brands credit. I'm not the type of fanboy that will always say that Sony's the best, because in video they're not at the moment. But in stills, they're up there at the top of everything. I mean, you know, that they really are, I believe, still with stills. If you're looking at the one lens mount as an advantage, because you have the APS-C and also the FE mount, so you can switch the lenses between the two of them without using adapters and things like that. There's an incredible now abundance of lenses that you can use. So there's no way I'm going to abandon the Sony system, but the R5 does interest me. I mean, because of what it offers. And I suppose that's one advantage about being independent, that I can do that without being told. I mean, if I was a Sony ambassador or something, I wouldn't be able to do that shift. I mean, that's why Manny left, because he couldn't try other cameras. You know, and I suppose in one way that can be an advantage if you are an independent reviewer like I am, that I can try anything out, which is a big advantage. Photomix said, and Sigma makes the 21.4 as well. Yep. Gerald said, handling and shooting with the Sony 21.8 at WPPI is really a GM lens in all aspects but name and price. Yep. The reviews that I saw, Gerald, was still saying that the 24 GM is better, is a little bit sharper, but I haven't tried both side by side, so I'm not sure. Good points. I went from Canon to Sony and back to Canon now. I only keep a few cameras and lenses though, so switching isn't hard. Yep. I mean, if you haven't got much, it's easy to switch. But for me, I've got too much. It's too expensive for me to switch because you do lose so much, particularly probably now with what's happened with the virus. I mean, your gear, used gear is going to really be worth way less than what it was previously. Guy with the camera said, Langston, with a Panasonic Olympus IBIS, I would try out Blackmagic. It's really useful. The IBIS on the Olympus and the Panasonics is incredible. Let me just scroll down to see if there's anything else that jumps out at me here before we go on to the next thing. Kevin said, Sony for stills is right, David. Remember, IAF, dynamic range, and super fast focusing. Canon R5 is interesting. Yep. I agree, Kevin. Like I said, if you were dealing with video, look, we don't know yet how good but I've got a feeling the IAF on the Canon R5 is going to be fine, because it tends to be okay now on the EOS Rs now that they've had that firmware update. Still a little bit behind the Sonys, but boy, they're getting close. We don't know how good the IAF, the dynamic range, will be. I mean, I still think Sony and Nikon probably have the best dynamic range out there, but we haven't seen what that R5 will do in dynamic range at this stage. But yeah, you can't beat the Sonys for dynamic range. That's for sure. Canon and Nikon, Sony and Nikon are both amazing for dynamic range. Mike said, "Can I ask a stupid question? How I can answer to others here? You just type their name in. You put the at." And then their name should come up if you start typing their name, and then you can answer to it. That's how that works, Mike. All right, let's go on to the next story. Because I just wanted to talk about this, because there's a review out of the Tamron 70 to 180. I think this was a German review or something like that, but I only wanted to read this down the bottom, because I'll put the links down below so that you can have a look at the video if you want to have a look at it. But one of the comments was interesting because this guy summarized this all up. So I wanted to share this where he summarized it all up. And it sort of reflects when I used it at WPPI. He said, I watched all of it, and this is his summary. Tamron is sharper than the Sony GM. So he's saying it's sharper than the Sony 28, the 70-200. In the center and especially in the corners at all focal lengths. The Tamron AF is a bit faster than the GM. Tamron has better light transmission. Now, I've heard that a few times, that they're saying that the f-stop is a fifth brighter than what the GM is. Zero chromatic aberration on either the Tamron GM or the G, so there's no chromatic aberration on any of them. Testing is done on a 60 megapixel in order to reveal any weakness that would be visible at 24 megapixel. The Tamron struck a perfect balance in this lens. It's the best bang for buck. Obviously, things like it's only 180 versus 200. So if you need the 200 mil, that's an issue. Then you still need to get the 70-200. It's missing OSS, but I don't think missing stabilization is an issue. The cameras already have it. The a7 III, the a9, the a7R III, the a7R4 all have IBIS. So I don't really think it's that necessary anymore. You just have to watch like anything though. When you're dealing with a long lens, you have to make sure your shutter speed is up enough to make sure you don't have any shake. It's missing obviously the buttons like the GMs have, but the Tamron is a lot more compact. It's cheaper, half the price basically. Feels less valuable because of the reduced weight. However, it's just a feeling. Also feels less professional. Again, just a feeling. The IQ is actually better. So that's the interesting sort of summary that came up with that. And it sort of matches what I found when I was at WPPI, because I used it quite a bit there actually. And I also spoke to Mark extensively. That review is still there where we discussed that. Mark was saying to me that they are astounded. He was astounded by how good that lens actually is, the 70-180, like how sharp it is, how quickly it focuses. He said it's actually going to shock people. And I was, when I used it, I was actually shocked at how well it did focus, and the sharpness in the image that I got back from that was incredible. So there's a couple of things there, and I've discussed that with you before, that the GM is only version 1, the 70-200, and I've discussed this before, that's only version 1. You are going to get a version 2 of the GM, which will obviously improve the AF again, where they probably put the linear motors in like the 135 has. So those things will be improved in the next GM version, and it probably will be sharper. But it looks like if you want perfect sharpness between that 70 and 180, it looks like the Tamron is going to beat the GM. And I think it's going to be a fact that it's going to be proven true. When I get one eventually for testing, I will test it against the F4 version that I've got, just so that you can test that. Now remember, the F4 version is slightly softer than the GM, but they're pretty close if you actually test them side by side. So I will test it against the 70-200 F4 version that I've got, just so we can sort of see if there's any difference. But I think if you're looking at it overall, if you don't mind losing that 20 mil, like, you know, if you need 200, you've got no option. You've either got to get the 70-200 GM or the 70-200 G lens. If you don't mind losing that, and I don't mind losing that 20 mil at the end, and I'm gaining the 2.8 aperture. I'm also gaining a lighter lens. The build quality is incredible. Even though, yes, it's a plastic material, the build quality is amazing on these lenses, like I've said. And you'll get better focusing than what you'll get on the GM. So I think something like this lens is going to be outstanding for the price that you're going to be able to get it with. It's still not going to be cheap, but it's going to be way cheaper than buying a GM. And I thought that summary was really interesting, and it's certainly exciting me, and eventually I will be getting one. So let me open up the chat on this just to see if people are saying anything about this. Gerald said, love the Tammy 70-180 2.8 review, very comprehensive. Jim said, he's just put that thing in there. Guy with the camera said, the German review has me sold. While I can't see the sharpness, I'll trust it. The bokeh in video was good enough. No peeping needed. And by the way, they created an English review along with the IBIS and OSS. Yeah, like I said, I don't think missing stabilization on that lens does not bother me at all. If they'd put all those things in, it would be more expensive. It would also be a lot heavier and larger. But remember, your camera has 3-axis stabilization in it anyway. So as long as you use a decent shutter speed, it's not going to be a problem. When I used it at WPPI, I did use a low shutter speed and the images still look sharp. The IBIS for stills is very, very good. Video may be another problem, but the IBIS for stills is really good just for the in-camera stabilization. So I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. Fadi Miak said, here is the issue. Even when they do make a better, sharper GM lens, with the Tamron being so good, it's going to be hard to justify the more expensive. Yeah, I agree, Ike. Like I said, if I was coming, and I'm not sponsored by Tamron, guys. I mean, they don't give me any money. All they do is give me the lens to review. But if I saw faults with it, I would say. Now, the thing is that I agree with what Ike's saying. If I was just buying a lens now, and you don't need 200, you can get by without the 200, I would get the 70 to 200. I would get the 17 to 28, the 28 to 75, and the 70 to 200. Because for what I do, that's all I need. And then the money you're saving, you've got enough money to go out and say buy a GM 135 or the GM 24mm, because you're saving massive money and you're getting image quality that is sharper. You're getting focusing that is just as good on the Tamron, the new Tamron 70 to 180. I believe it's going to be better. Now, I'll test that side by side, but I believe that the Tamron 70 to 180 is going to be better than what the GMs have or what the Sony lenses have. So you can't go wrong, and you're saving money. You're getting great, long-lasting build quality and super lightweight compared to anything that you'd lug around with a GM lens. I mean, if you want to go down the GM lines, that's your decision. That's what you would, I mean, obviously only you can make the decision on what you'd like to buy. But if it was me personally, I'd be getting the Tamron, definitely. But stay tuned. I may be reviewing it soon. George said, my gas is getting worse. I'm going to need an intervention. I love it. Bit off topic. What is your favourite gimbal? My favourite gimbal is, I've got two of them that I love. These two, I'll show you exactly which are my two favourite ones. So I've got two, all right? So these are the gimbals that I love. This is the Moser Air 2. If I'm using heavy gear, this is the one that I'll use because this thing is built like a tank and it will go all day and it will take large lenses, and if I'm using microphones and all these other things, I take that. If I want to go a little bit lighter, I use the Firetech. This is the, I think it's called the AK2000S. It's the latest version. There was an AK2000, which is the previous version. I've got that over there, actually. But this is my favorite if I'm using smaller type cameras or smaller lenses. These will all take the a7iii and the a9. But if I'm starting to use bigger lenses, I like to use the gimbal that's a bit stronger. If I'm sort of doing more run and gun type work where I want to travel a bit lighter, I take the AK2000S, which is that one. This is a Firetech. The Moser Air 2 is my favorite if I'm using heavy gear. Full disclosure, I bought the Moser Air 2, so I paid for that one. But Firetech sent me this one, which is the AK2000S. So I didn't pay for that. But like I said, I'd always tell you the truth. But I love that gimbal. I like the build quality. I love the handle that's built in. This didn't come with the handle. This is a small rig handle that's on this one. So I've paid for that extra, whereas the handle comes with this one. I'm not sure if it comes in the standard kit or whether you have to get another one. The good part about this one, though, you can change the batteries in it. The Firetech, it's got the inbuilt battery, but it lasts all day, so I've never had a problem with that. But I do like having the fact that I can take the batteries out of the Moza Air 2. So I love both of these gimbals. I think they're really good. And I like this one for small work. I'm going to review this shortly. This is another one that was sent to me, Firetech. This is the G6. So stay tuned for this. This is good for an A6000 series and something like a 10 to 18. So if you're putting on a lens like that, it's fine because it's nice and small. And it doesn't weigh much at all, it'll even take the ND on there. And this is tiny. This is what I use to go all around the United States because I wanted to travel really light. So this is the Firetech G6. You can also put your little Osmo Actions and things like that on these as well, or an iPhone. They come with attachments that you can put phones on them and other things. So this is really useful, and it's metal. It's built really well. So stay tuned for the review of that. That'll be coming up in the coming days. So I hope that answered your question. Jason said, what about the 70 to 200 Sigma? That's going to be great, Jason. Again, I think that will beat the GM when it's released. The other thing too is that it will be much heavier though, and I prefer, apart from the 135, which I do use for portraits, I like to travel as light as possible. So the Tamron for me would still be the one that I would get. But if you don't like Gerald, for instance, see, Gerald loves the 2470 Sigma. He adores that lens. He took that all around the US. He doesn't mind carrying around a bit more weight, whereas I would prefer to use, say, the Tamron 17 to 28. But Gerald loves the 2470. That's an outstanding lens as well. Sigma make great lenses. If you look at, say, Sigma and what Tamron are doing at the moment, Sony have to do version 2s of a lot of their lenses because they're getting beaten by Sigma and they're also getting beaten by Tamron. So they do have to bring out version 2s of those lenses. And the Sigmas are great too because they're half the price as well. Like the 2470 is half the price of the GM version and it's a better lens. You know, it's Sony need to do something in their pricing of their lenses because it's a bit crazy at the moment. I mean, I'd be buying the Sigma 2470 rather than the GM 2470. But some of you might differ than that. I know Oreo loves his 2470 GM. Let's keep going down the questions. Carol said, is there a price for the Tamron 70 to 180? Well, I know they were saying in here, I believe that I think it was going to be a price around $1,000, Carol. I think that was around the price that I'd heard. Well, they're saying here 1,200 euro. Let me just say yes. I just want to see what the voting is on this. 58% are saying yes, they'd buy it at that price of 1,200 euro. No was 42%. It's got 1,038 votes have said yes, and no, 42% have said no. So it looks like people would be willing to pay that. I think at the price, like I said, we're all struggling for money at the moment though, but if you did have the money, that's a great price lens, and I think, you know, it's probably going to be around 1,000 US. Who knows with the Australian dollar the way it is, it'll probably be around 2 because the Australian dollar sucks at the moment. It'll probably be 2,000 here. So let me just go back to this. So yeah, about 1,000 US, Carol, I would think. Mark said the 135 is the showcase of what sharpness is possible. Yep, that is an amazing lens, Mark. I agree with you. It's unbelievable. I just love it. I adore that lens. Which release plate do you use on your gimbal? Well, I use Arca Swiss. That's what I'm using all the time. I'm using Arca Swiss. The Firetech has Arca Swiss. I'll just check. Yeah. Yeah, it does. The Firetech has Arca Swiss built in it. The Moza Air has a whole system that you take off. But what I like about the Moza Air, particularly, is the Air 2, is that you can take everything off on the camera and then put it back on again. So you could be using it for stills or take it onto handheld video or something and then throw it back on the gimbal. You can sort of do that with the Firetech, but you've got to be a little bit more careful. The Moza Air 2 systems are a little bit better. But I do use Arca Swiss as my system. I have the small rig handle, love it. Yeah, it's great. The small rig one is amazing. Oh yeah, cheers. Someone said the beer's going flat. Guy with the camera said that G6 is as much as I'm willing to suffer with a gimbal. Yeah, it's great. I mean, look how small this thing is. It's ridiculous. And it works perfectly with the A6000 type series cameras. I don't think it'd take an A7 III though. But what I do love about it all is that it has everything locks. So if you're traveling, you can just lock everything off. So basically, see how this will tilt that way. Well, if I bring in here and lock it, see how it locks now? There's another lock on the bottom through here. So now that's locked as well. There's another lock up the top up here. Where was that? Oh, here. If you lock this as well, then what that will do is if you're traveling around, I hate it when you're moving and the camera's falling all over the place. Well, this is really good because it locks in every single position. You just have to make sure that you unlock everything though. That can be a problem if you forget. And the other thing too is it just screws in on the bottom and then you've got to move your camera up and down. There's no sort of plate system of taking it quickly on and off. But for a travel type gimbal, this Firetech G6 is fantastic and it has all the features that the bigger gimbals have. You know, you got your little scroll wheel at the side, which you can program to different things. I love it. I think it's great. Just stay tuned until you see the footage. I mean, look, it won't replace a big gimbal. This compromise is like everything. It's never going to replace a larger gimbal in stability, for instance. But for something, if you wanted to travel as light as possible and get, you know, decent, stable footage, it's really good. It's not going to beat a Moza Air 2, though. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It's never going to replace a gimbal like that. But for what it is, for traveling very, very light, it's brilliant. Steve said his homebrew keeps its head. Yeah, I wish this would. David said, hi David from Portugal here. Do you know when the Tamron will be arrive in Europe? No, I haven't been told anything yet about arrival dates. I would think it will be reasonably soon, but who knows with what's happened with the virus. But if they're all out for review, like you saw that one I showed here, obviously it must be getting close. So I would think, you know, maybe a month or two away, a couple of months away. My suggestion, though, will be with anything like with Tamron, if the 70-180 is, as soon as it's announced, if you do want one, I would pre-order it because they may be hard to get, particularly with manufacturing the way it's been hurt lately. Gerald said, I heard 1,200 United States dollars. Carol said, I guess I will be selling my favourite 70-200mm f4. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do, Carol. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Just wait a while, though. Wait for things to improve before you do that, though. What is the perfect size gimbal I need? It depends, Hero, on what you're going to be shooting. You'd have to let me know what you shoot. It all depends on if you have a decent, like an a7 III, most of the gimbals will take that sort of weight, but it's the second you put a lens on. Like if you wanted to put a 24-70 GM on there, or a 70-200, you'd need something like a Moza Air 2. If you only wanted to put, say, the GM24 on there, well then the Firetech AK2000S would be ample. But you'd be starting to struggle with those gimbals. It will take it, I think, but the motors may struggle a little bit if you're dealing with really heavy glass. Like the 24-70 Sigma, you'd need something like a Moza Air 2 to carry that because it's a big, heavy lens. Whereas if you're dealing with something like this setup, or having the Tamron 28-75 or the Tamron 17-28, you could easily do that on the Firetech AK2000S. Just make sure it's the S version though, because that's the latest one. It's much better than the previous one. That's it. My Rowan S is unflappable. Yeah, the Rowan S's are great as well. I mean, that's similar. The Rowan S is a comparable gimbal to the Moza Air 2. They're sort of in that same league, you know, of... I think the Moza Air 2 takes more weight, a little bit more than what the Rowan S does, but they're both great gimbals for carrying around big honking cameras. All right, let's go on to the next story. because I wanted to talk about this Sony preamp. I've got a bit of a rant about this. 10440. Now, there's a story going around on the web. I noticed Sony Alpha Room has shared this. That they're saying a great preamp shootout. Which camera has the best audio quality? Spoiler, it's not the Sony a7 III. Now, if you've watched, they're actually rating the a7 III as last in the whole group. Well, all I can say, looking at this story, I'll show you what they rated as being the better ones. The Canon 1DX Mark III, Nikon Z6, Panasonic S1H, Fuji X-T3, Olympus EM1 Mark III, and the Sony a7 III. Now, I know for fact that the X-T3 didn't have good preamps in it. But this was done at DP Review, I believe. Let me just, I'm pretty sure it was done at DP Review. This is the most load of crap that I've ever heard in my life. They had to have a faulty camera. The only thing I could think about that what's happened here is that DP Review, the camera was faulty, because I'm telling you that the Sony preamps are incredible. Like, I can never hear noise. Like, if you listen to that video, it sounds like they were almost having a chainsaw that was sitting right next. I mean, look, it was ridiculous. There was something seriously flawed in their testing of that. It's not what I've found. It's not what anyone else that I've ever heard has never complained about the Sony preamps. I've heard people complain about the X-T3, and that was rated above the Sony a7 III. So I'm calling BS on this. I think there's something's going on here. They're either, for some reason, having a go at Sony, or the camera was faulty. That's the only thing I can think of, because I listen to my stuff through headphones, and I record audio all the time into my cameras, and I've never, ever thought, wow, this needs noise reduction. I've never used noise reduction in my life on a Sony camera. There's something wrong. There's something seriously wrong. So when you're looking, if you do read this story, I think Gerald Undone has done one as well. I haven't even looked at it, so I don't even know what Gerald Undone has said, whether he's backed this up or whether he said it was rubbish. But I have to tell you, it's rubbish. It's not true. It's complete bullshit. This is the biggest ridiculous story I've ever heard in my life. They should have tested this against another camera or something, because they probably would have found either their testing is flawed, or the camera's flawed, or they're telling lies. That's the only thing I can say about what's gone on here, because I'm telling you that the Sony a7 III audio preamps in it are not an issue at all. And I'm not going to go any further than that, but I'm just calling bullshit on it. It's rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Let me just see if anyone's mentioning anything about that in the chat, because it's just absolute crap. Hero said the Sony preamps are great. Yep, I agree, Hero. They are. Gerald Undone. Oh, he did debunk it. Well, I haven't watched it, Mark, so I'm not sure what Gerald has. All I saw was that he'd done a video about it. I wasn't sure what he'd said or whatever. It's rubbish. It's absolute crap. I can't believe they even... I mean, places like DP Review, I'm sure it was DP Review that was on, they should be more credible with their stories, and they really should have tested that. When it was like as bad as what they showed, they should have done a second sample with a different camera or something, because I don't know anyone that has ever said Sony has bad preamps. I don't know anyone that has ever said that. So, yeah. So Gerald Undone did debunk it. Okay, well, it doesn't surprise me at all. Hero said, okay, so I need something bigger. Yeah, if you're carrying around a big lenses, you... Dude, yeah, Gerald Undone dispel this. Okay, I'll have to watch that video to see what he says. But will the SC take an a7 III and a decent lens? What's the SC? DP Review says they will redo the test with another camera, set it on Gerald's channel. Oh, okay. Well, they should have done that before they came out. It's ridiculous. I mean, look, DP Review would have recorded with the A7 IIIs before, and I'm sure people that were there would have already said something about the preamps in their reviews. It doesn't make sense because they have reviewers all the time that review these cameras, and like I said, I've heard that the XT3 had bad preamps, but I've never ever heard anyone ever say that the A7 III has. So they should have been more careful with their review. I just hate, I know people say they got me pissed. I just hate when people tell untruths. You've got to check your work to make sure that, that you're giving out credible news stories. And this is a typical fake news story. It really is. The audio story is probably an April Fool's thing. It was crap. It's never heard me so angry. I just hate stuff like that. It does my head in. They must have had a faulty A7 III, and there was a number of faulty jacks that being reported about a year ago. Yeah, it's got to be faulty. Bullshit. Altric said, "Say it one more time." I love it. Maybe they thought they were special and discovered something. Who knows, Langston? But you've got to be careful when you put out that sort of thing. Any concern about the Sony reorganisation where R&D funds will disappear? Well, it is always a worry, James. I mean, the way that they've now restructured their company, so it could be an issue down the track. We don't know how they've restructured everything in separate departments. You can wear a baseball cap with a "Make Aussie Great Again" and say fake news. I love it. Maybe they thought they were... I've read that one already. Langston says, "Bad habit. Sorry, I missed your question. My setup was the A7 III with a 24 1.4, not a small lens." Yeah, it would handle it okay, that one, yeah. Guy with the camera said, something related to the preamps. I think the Sony mic may be a weak point. There are a few YouTubers in the past that have broken the jack. I broke my jack on the R3 and it cost $400 to repair. Michelle said, Gerald did an awesome job debunking DP's claim. It was extremely thorough, and he always is extremely thorough. I probably should have watched that before I went on a rant, really. And compared the A7 III with the Panasonic S1 and the 1H. Vincent, if you're being blocked, there's obviously a reason why they're blocking your messages. Just be careful, Vincent, or you get dumped out. Tim said it was weird. DP Review doing during COVID time. Testing was done through a window of someone's house as well. So yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, they should have been. They should have been more careful about what they did. I noticed Vincent's going off about something. Vincent, if you're there's moderators in the group. If you're posting something that shouldn't be posted, they'll just delete it or you'll get blocked. So just be careful, mate. It's just the only warning you get. We don't put up with crap here. All right, so let's go on to the next story. I didn't put the lens down on that one. Oh, yes, I did. One. So if you see that, if you read anything about the Sony preamps being bad, just don't pay any attention to it at all. 113. Oops. 15. So the next one is interesting because what do you think about this? This is a rumor going around, and look, I've been talking about this for a while. That Sony have been saying that they're going to do a fast GM, but they're saying now they're going to do it this year. So, saying incoming thumbs down 4, I love it. Yeah, Sony have talked about doing a fast lens for a long, long period of time. I think they mentioned it. I think I mentioned it last year actually. That they were potentially talking about doing an f1 or an f1.2 lens. So they have been talking for a while about doing it, and it looks like there's rumours now that it may happen. The interesting thing was I voted for I was hoping they'd do an 85 1.2 lens, but most votes, because there was a vote down here that I can't show you now because I've already voted. There was a thing down here where I think they had a vote between a 135 and a 50mm. Most people actually said they would like the 50mm more than they would like the 135. I'd love the 135, but sorry, 85. I voted for the 85, not the 135. I'm happy with the 1.8 135. I'd love an 85 1.2. Most people said they'd love a 50mm 1.2. I'm just curious to know if Sony did do this, and they are saying that Sony will launch its first GM. They're saying it here. That Sony will launch its first 1.2 fast GM lens in 2020. What would you want to have? And look, I'm going to ask in the chat because we'll check that in a minute too. But I'd love to know in the discussion down below as well. What do you think? Would you love, say, a 50 1.2? Would you like an 85 1.2? I don't think we're going to get a 135 1.2. I don't think that will happen. But we could probably get an 85, a 50, or a 35. Or even possibly a 20. I'd love to know what your opinion would be. Most people in the chat in this voted for the 50 1.2. I'd love an 85, but I'd love to know your opinion. But it looks like they're now saying that this may happen. I suppose the thing is we just don't know with the virus if this will happen this year. But I know Sony have intended to do it because last year I did do a whole story on the Sony. One of the Sony high-ranking managers had said that an f1 lens was possible, and in fact, it was only a matter of time until they brought out something that was a very, very fast glass. So it would be interesting. I would love an 85 1.2 though. Now, I'll go to the last question before we open up the chat. I've got beer burps going on as well. Let me just put down here 116. This is unreal. This is what I'm saying about how lucky we are in Sony now. That the Sigma CEO has now said focus is now on the design of compact FE lenses like the 45 2.8 FE. So they're also saying now they want to design compact lenses. We know that already lenses like the 70 to 200 and the 24-70 are big honking lenses. I mean, they're big, they're very solid, built like tanks. Really big lenses. They're now also saying that they want to do compact lenses, so probably similar to what Tamron have been doing and things like that, or making smaller lenses like this 45 f2.8. But there's a whole thing here about discussing, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but they're just saying it's simple because it's simply because we've had a higher demand for mirrorless lenses. The mirrorless camera market is more stable compared to the digital SLR. I mean, obviously what's happening now, the time is just about reached the point where camera manufacturers are going to start disregarding the digital SLR cameras and forcing down to mirrorless cameras. I mean, you can even see Canon now starting to do that with the R5 and the R6. I don't think we'll probably see another digital SLR. We may not see another digital SLR from Canon. There might be one or whatever here, but we won't see another 1DX, I don't think, anymore. That's finished now with the new one that's just come out. Probably the D6 line will be the last of that high-end digital SLR cameras. Nikon will bring out some really high-end mirrorless cameras as well. And the lens manufacturers obviously are going to start supporting that. So you're going to find that Sigma are going to start supporting it. Tamron already are. You've got Samyang, all these other manufacturers that are really going to start pushing more directly down to doing mirrorless. And that's exactly what this sort of comment is. So, we're going to see some interesting lenses coming up in the near future. That's for sure. That's all I wanted to mention about that. I'll leave that article in the chat down below, though. 1:18:20, because I want to open up to Q&A. So if you have anything for Q&A, guys, we'll just be here for a little bit of time. Fire away. I'm curious to see what people are thinking about those lenses, though. Hero said, yes, the 105. There was still rumours going around. I know there was a patent. I'm sure there was a patent from Sony about 100mm lens, but we have never seen that eventuate. So it's interesting. A 105 f1.2 would be amazing. Jason said he also voted for the 85 1.2. The current GM needs to be updated. Yep. Just imagine an 85mm with the linear focus motors of the 135 and the amazing bokeh. It'd be just like the dream lens for weddings. I love shooting 85. I can't shoot the 135 all the time because I need that reach. That's the problem with the 135. So usually when I'm indoors and things like that, doing pictures of the bride, like Head and Shoulders particularly, or getting changed, I use the 85mm. If I could use a 1.2 that had the amazing focus of, like the 135, wow, what a lens. Photoman said 85 1.2 as well. Gerald said, I still think the 85 1.2 makes more sense and will be a greater showpiece and seller. I want the 85 1.2 much more than the 50. I do too, but it's interesting, Gerald, that, like I said, more votes went for the 50mm than the 85. Kate said 35 or 85 1.2. Remember, you have also now got the beautiful Sigma 35 1.2 as well, though. BJ said he would like the GM 50 1.2. See, there's a couple here now saying that. We need an updated 50. That's what Tim's saying. Guy with the camera said 105 1.2 would be amazing and break both shoulders. Yeah, it certainly would. That's for sure. But boy, what a lens that would be. I mean, the 105 Sigma was incredible, but that was a massive honking lens. I could picture what a 1.2 would be. 85 1.2 would be cherry. Mark said Sony already has the 85, but no 105. Yeah, but they don't have the 1.2 mark, and it is getting old. The 85 1.4 is now, it's starting to get a bit dated. It doesn't focus that well, for instance, things like that. Oops. Gerald said Sony knows they need a new 85mm as their GM1 is old and slow. The 85 1.2 would help compete with competitors. Yep, I agree, Jerry, that's for sure. Langston says, I would kind of like a 50 or a 35 1.2, but I shoot events and I'm talking about low light. Yeah, I can understand if you're a videographer that the 85, the 50 and the 35 may be more advantageous, that's for sure. If you're a portrait shooter, though, 85 1.2, boy. Guy with the camera said Sigma is going to make a 28 2.8, a 90 2.8 based off their APS-C 19 and 60. Interesting. Is Pentax still alive? I mean, I don't know. You never hear about them, though, do you, Mike? I agree. Gerald says, Mark, I own the 85 GM and it needs an update. It tests behind many competitors. Yeah, and you know the difference now, Gerald, because you're using the 135. You can really see how the 135 focuses, for instance, as compared to what the Sony does. And until you've tried both of those lenses, you don't realise the difference. If you put the 85 with those linear focus motors in, would be brilliant. And if it was a 1.2, it would still focus amazingly well, even at 1.2. Jim said, I have the 85 GM and agree it's slow, but once focused, wow. Yeah, I mean, it does produce great results, Jim, I agree. 1.2 all the way to compete with Canon glass. How good is the tone in the 1.2? Well, we don't know. We haven't got one yet. In the Sigma, it's beautiful. If you're talking about the Sigma, it's amazing, Scots. Leslie said, is there truth in the story of the Sony a7S III to be announced on April the 20th? A7 IV, I mean. I don't believe so, no. Leslie, I think that's all just rumours. I don't think, look, there's a possibility Sony may announce something and then you're going to have to wait for it, but it just doesn't seem to be that the way that they work. Usually their announcements are, they announce it and then say a month later you can buy the camera. I think the issue is, I know Canon have announced those cameras, but Canon announced all of that stuff really before the virus took hold. They also did. I also read somewhere the other day that they said that they're not held back. So they're saying now that they're not going to hold it back due to the virus and they're still going to release it. So I thought, well, that was interesting because I thought they may hold it back at this stage and do something a little bit later, like release it a little bit later on. There's two ways of thinking about it. Sony could be very nervous about the Canon R5 and the R6. If they're very nervous about it, they may have an announcement on the 20th of April. And what they may do then is do what Canon did early on and give a really good announcement about what the camera is going to have to stop people switching over, for instance. And that could be something that they do. Because I've got a feeling, look, no matter how you think about it, Sony has to be worried about those two Canon cameras. They have to be worried about the R5 and the R6. They have to be. Because they're going to hurt Sony. There's no doubt about the fact that that will hurt Sony, and the fact of people will stop switching, or they may even lose some Sony users that want to go over for the video features that the R5 has, for instance. So Sony may announce something on the 20th to stop people being scared. They might announce an a7S III or an a7 IV that have features that are comparable to what those two cameras have, and then they may just say, they might just not say release date. It might say released in your fall, or released in winter, or something like that. I'm not sure. But they may just say it's coming. Bide your time. Just wait. We are going to answer what you need. And that could be something that happens. I just don't think at this stage, with China and everyone just coming back on. Remember, the cameras usually aren't manufactured in China. They might be Thailand or wherever. But all the components, most of those things would probably come from China. A lot of those things would come from there. And even all those places, Thailand's been hit by the virus. Malaysia's been hit by the virus. So I couldn't see them being able to release anything at this stage for the foreseeable future anyway. But we might get an announcement, so who knows. Guy with the camera said, the 85GM is spectacular, even if it's not uber sharp. It's still a great lens. I'm not saying it's not a great lens, but it's if you've used the 135, you understand what I'm saying. Gerald says, Sony needs exciting releases to compete with Canon lenses, and it needs to be the 85 1.2 for sure. I agree, Jerry. I totally agree with you. Mark said, I still own the Canon 85 1.2 adapted by MC11 and had a very good case for the 1.2. I love Sigma, but these new lenses look like brass doorknobs, small and heavy. That's interesting. Sigma, I love Sigma lenses, but I don't want to carry that weight around. Ask Jerry. Jerry loves his 2470. Tim said, I want the 200 to 600 1.2. I love it. You'd need a forklift to carry it around with you. Where are we? Anthony said 41.2 just because. David said, do you believe the A7 IV rumours about 8K 60 frames per second 2 times crop? No. They're not. Well, I don't believe it at this stage. I think Sony probably, I don't think they'll release an 8K footage, but they might now be forced to due to the fact that Canon have done it. But it's like I've said to people before, 8K at this stage is still not really needed. 4K 60 is needed. Sony may give us 4K 120 though. That could be an amazing thing that Sony could add. Most of us don't need 8K at this stage because I couldn't even process it on my computer. That'd be my issue, but I certainly could use 4K 60. Remember, we haven't got anything on Sony yet that can tackle 4K 60, so I don't think they'll do 8K 60, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do 4K 120 and we get higher bit depths. It's going to be interesting to see if Sony protect their FX9 and camera ranges, you know, the FS6 and stuff like that. Like, I hope that's not the case, but I don't believe we'll get 8K 4K 60, but who knows? I mean, I'll be happy if it's there, because remember, if they do release 8K 60, you don't have to use it. That's the beauty of it. It future-proofs your camera. So even though it has 8K 60, you could just not use it. You could just then put that down to 4K 60 or whatever you'd like. So it may have it, but yeah, who knows? Mike said, I think they must make the Sony body bigger for 8K. Yep, they'd have to do something, that's for sure. Sadly, though, there's virus crap. Who could afford an 85 exactly? Not me at the moment, that's for sure. James said, any truth that Sony has been pulling chips from the camera division for the gaming division? I've got no idea, James. I'm not sure at all. They'll always sell more games, I remember. They'll always sell more PlayStations and things like that than they will with cameras, that's for sure. Gerald said, do you think the 1 year postponement of the Olympics will give Sony more time to develop new... That may, Jerry. That might be a blessing in disguise, in a way. We could potentially see an A9 III before that stage. Remember, I always said that the A9 II, and I did review it for a month, so I know that camera extensively now. it was only an incremental upgrade. The A9 II, I wouldn't recommend to buy over the A9. I'd buy the A9 over the A9 II any day, due to the fact I just didn't think it was enough of an upgrade to step up. But this could give Sony the time to do an A9 III, perhaps, Jerry. So it could be interesting if they'll do that. They may now, because that's now going to be another 12 months since that camera's out. So who knows? It's possible, yes. And that's about it, guys. We're down. Ike said the people switching to Canon for the EOS R5 were already going to Canon. You may be right about that. They were just waiting for a camera like the R5 to come along. And there is nothing Sony can do about it. Because those people just need Canon camera, they could feel good about owning one of those sweet lenses. Even if the A7S III has the same specs as the EOS R, some of them are still going to jump. Interesting. I did always say all along that the EOS R5 was a weird camera because it was holding back, but they had this incredible lens lineup that was just sitting there waiting for a high-end body. And I always did say that I believe that the Canon would be a killer camera, and it was only a matter of time until they released something that would benefit those lenses that were out there, because it just didn't match. You had this camera that was nowhere near high-ended enough to match these really high-end lenses that they produced in the EOS R line. Well, now the truth is starting to come out now with these two releases. We're finally going to have two bodies that are capable of using those amazing lenses. So it's good for all of us. I mean, like I said, I may get one down the track and say one or two lenses to use in video. I certainly, like I said, won't be switching though, but it might be something that I'll look at getting later on. Also, it would help on YouTube as well. I mean, it's always better if you have different gear that you can talk about. Apart from that, guys, that's about it for today. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe. Please look after your family. Remember, look after your elderly, particularly the elderly and the weak. I am thinking about, we're lucky in Australia, we've only got 4,000 cases or some, it's a small number here in Australia, even though we're down in lockdown. We're very lucky and fortunate in this country, and I do think about all of you, particularly, people in the US and Italy and England and Spain and all the countries like that where you're really struggling with this horrible virus. So please stay safe. Apart from that, I'll have a couple of reviews up. I might have this unboxing on Monday, which will be Sunday US time and Europe time. So stay tuned for that, because if it comes, I will do a live unboxing. Apart from that, guys, I'll see you all in the next video. Have a great weekend, everyone.